We must base our response on coordinated policies, as all our countries face unique and evolving challenges in facing up to the threat of money laundering and terrorist financing. This is particularly true where we are gathered today in the East African region. Efforts to prevent and prosecute money laundering involving authorities and private actors at all levels are therefore extremely important to deter and fight organized crime.
Illicit flows come in many types, but in general there are two main effects. One is to reduce either the revenues or the assets that states have, and the second is to reduce the capacity of states to act and the strength of institutions. And that's broadly true, whether we're talking about laundering of the proceeds of crime, about corruption and the theft of state assets, or as we think the larger part of the problem, at least in financial terms, is if we're talking about the evasion of taxes by individuals, by companies, and about the use of anonymous companies to abuse market regulations. So this set of areas that covers a great many different types of transactions has these common effects that undermine the ability of states, either financially or practically, to deliver security, whether that's to maintain the monopoly on the use of force, for example, or it's to invest in infrastructure, in health and education.
I think we've heard some of the figures being thrown about, but the most important statistic here is that 57% of all illicit financial flows that occur do occur in the mineral or extractive sector. That's a quite a disproportionate percentage within the sector that accounts for this particular governance problem. Another statistics probably can be seen through, if you look at the oil sector alone in Africa, there's a direct correlation between the incidence of illicit financial flows and countries that are leading oil exporting countries in Africa. And in fact, for each dollar of exports in oil, there is at least 26 cents out of that dollar that leave the shores of Africa through illicit financial outflows. One of the reasons being assigned for this sector being prone to illicit financial flows is the issue of political discretion over this seemingly secretive and enclave sector. As you recall, over the years, African states control this sector, and there's very little openness within the sector to the general public.
The center of most of the things that we are talking about here in Africa today is about leadership. Leadership matters. Leadership is everything. In countries that are trying to be nations, in countries that are trying to overcome challenges and difficulties, we often rely so much on leadership. They determine things. You may have the laws, you may have everything, but take it from me, I'm telling you, a lot of it depends on those who are leading us. At times, even if you have the institutions and structures, if you are unfortunate to have a bad leader, then there is that possibility it will be destroyed. You need the money for you to do the basic things. And if the money goes out, it is going to be useful to others where the money is going. That is the tragedy of illicit flow of money. It is fast before anything.
But the nature of peace that is established in a country is very closely related to the nature of the finance that is made available for that peace. Now, there's a lot of research on the role of conflict over minerals, over natural resources, and how it fuels war. Our interest was how those natural resources and the revenues that go with them can be made to fuel peace and fuel sustainable peace. And one of the concerns that emerged in our discussion was that the form of peacemaking that was being adopted and developed internationally and in the region of the Horn of Africa was what you might call a rental peace, a peace based on rent incomes. Now, empirically, if you look at national budgets and peace deals, there's a very close relationship between when budgets go up and when peace deals are made. And President Bashir is here. For 10 years, President Bashir, I have no idea how you managed to run the government of Sudan on a budget of less than $1 billion per year. I think if there's a Nobel Prize in financial management, I think it should go to you, because I simply fail to understand how it is possible to run a country of the size of Sudan on that small budget. When oil was developed, the oil production was developed in Sudan, the budget of the government of Sudan rose from about $900 million in 1999 to over $11 billion some 7 years later. Now that made it possible for President Salva Kiir and the leadership of the SPLM to share in the national wealth. And we see time and again, when we look at how budgets increase and peace deals are made, we see that there is a close correlation between the two. And this is a lesson that needs to be learned, and there are positive and negative aspects to this lesson.
Issue of a visionary and transformative leadership. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to elaborate. I'll leave it at that. That's one. Two, the need to invest more in empirical research. Policy response to IFFS requires a strong partnership between Africa and the international community, especially the United Nations, and such a strategy must be at national, regional, continental, and global levels, rather than leaving the problem to individual countries to address.
The measure of illicit financial flow is inevitable. Maybe it's even a part of the normal process of the development of our countries. But my observation, as I try to summarize, pull different threads together, is that there are two stark realities of illicit financial flows in two sets of states. One, states where fragility, as one of the presenters said, states where fragility and extremism are not present, are not so present. B, states where they are present. And we saw that distinction this morning. One conclusion I take from there, though, is that if we listen to examples provided about South Africa, for example, or Nigeria, and then we listen to Somalia, but especially Central African Republic, they represent two extreme ends of a spectrum. So let's look at this spectrum and see that we're dealing with a lot of African countries that are in between them. But those examples relate to strategic decisions and technical solutions, and they're taking us some way. Transparency through legislation, law enforcement, and this whole notion of extended confiscation, which came out in the first panel. 3, ensuring corporate transparency through a whole combination of domestic and international processes and collaborations.
Grâce à la communauté internationale et surtout grâce à la sous-région Afrique centrale, à l'Union africaine, et maintenant demain aux Nations unies, nous espérons pouvoir remettre en place la sécurité dans ce pays et organiser des élections libres et transparentes. Mais ce qui est difficile à rattraper, c'est tous ces millions de jeunes qui n'ont pas d'emploi, 1 million de populations qui vivent en dehors de chez eux, la moitié des 4,5 millions de Centrafricains qui dépendent de l'aide humanitaire pour survivre, l'économie qui est complètement détruite, et surtout, aujourd'hui, un élément nouveau, c'est que des communautés qui ont toujours vécu ensemble, c'est-à-dire les communautés musulmanes et les autres, aujourd'hui vont se regarder en chien de faïence et la réconciliation sera un processus long et difficile.
Dave.